a way forward. We look at Africa's youth, and if we just look at the last 5 or 4 years, Kasmuel, that there have been uprisings around nations, whether you look from End SARS in Nigeria to Give Us Bread in Egypt to what happened in Sudan, if you want to look into Rwanda, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Kenya, Madagascar, led by the youth who have said, you know what, we're taking back our country in one way or another. Was this an opportunity to do that further with the relationship that has been renewed with France?
First of all, I think we ought to look at it from a more balanced perspective, and I understand why Angel would wax lyrical. Again, as a chair of the Youth League of Jubilee, they need to reinvent themselves, and therefore any airtime that can be afforded them, I think she has to capitalize. It is perplexing that Angel just decided to look at the person of Macron and not the contents of the summit or resulting benefits or lack thereof. I expected her as an alumni of the University of Nairobi to highlight that 5.6 billion will be invested in the engineering wing to further stem and hopefully produce minds that will redeem this country. I expected that to be at the front, and this is what happens when you're blinded by negativity. Is we then fail to look at the issues with a fine-toothed comb. The thing that makes it, and that's amongst many other things, I think out of this summit, Kenya has benefited greatly in the sense that there's 127 billion that has been left here. I might have my reservations about France, and because we're looking at it as a youth perspective. There are deeper issues with this, but the reason why Kenya seems as this seems like an opportunity, and I'm thinking about this in a diplomatic sense, is we do not have previous relations with France. Mm-hmm. We certainly do not have colonial time with them, but if we are to extend the same for the goose, it must be the same for the gander. Mm-hmm. It cannot be that, for example, we will cozy up to Britain, we will cozy up to America, and then pretend that when good things are happening to us from France, that this suddenly becomes bad. And I'm saying this fully cognizant of the fact that our generation also we have to step out of hypocrisy. We have to say that we will not work with the global north or with the Western powers, or we will find ways to meaningfully collaborate, and I use this word very carefully, for the betterment of our generation. I'm saying this knowing full well that we're the same people that you find people saying that down with American imperialism, for example, but Angel and I are alumni of the same program that is fully sponsored by the American government. So it cannot be that by day we chant down with American imperialism, and then by night we want to find whatever benefits exist there. And even in the furtherance, of course, I can see what people might be, the pushback might be against, is because we want to tour Paris, we want to all the luxuries and trappings of the French exceptionalism. But what people are pushing back against, of course, is the neo-colonialist aspect of it, mm-hmm. where we do not want to be enslaved, or we do not want an extractive or exploitative relationship.
And that makes sense to you somehow?
It does. Okay. I think it does, because we're allowed to want this. We're human. What I think, the extraction, I disagree with as well. So if France were to come in here on an extractive thing, and I see some very valid points where, for example, there are troops that have been brought that are not subject to our judicial systems. I think that is questionable, even in terms of our foreign policy. But then the port in Mombasa, I think there's about 104 billion going in there. Of course, this could be for whatever interest France has, but we also must ask ourselves, are these necessary things? We must either reject them in totality or accept them wholly and find ways of working together, because we cannot remain in a state of perpetual romanticization of conflict, for example. Graça Machel was here, for crying out loud. I don't think that Angel, for example, is a bigger revolutionary than Graça Machel. She's been the first lady of 2 African countries, and her role in the emancipation of our people cannot be overstated. But she was here at the Africa Forward Summit, and her interaction with the young people, she said that it was precious, and she was saying worth. Two, on the, and this could be controversial, but I don't see anything wrong that President Macron did when he stood up and told the room to quiet down. First, that's how I know a person who was following or who was invested in the summit, is that if you're here as young people, because remember, it was young people who were speaking about culture, which is something that is rather important to us. If there are people in a room that you have purposefully decided to go into, that you applied to get into, it's either we do away with this whole thing and say that let's just skip to the concert where all of us can be noisy, or let's listen to what's going on, because we cannot be looking for a few clicks and whatever. Again, contextually, the room was very loud and there were several breakout rooms. So I don't see why. If I would do the same, of course, contextually, you'd say whatever it is, but we ought to respect ourselves first before we demand for respect elsewhere. Because if we were silent, I don't think we would have seen this. We would have used this opportunity to further our agenda in a better